The Egyptian duet, where the Greek show begins with an oboe and a spoken name. The Egyptian night begins with a ledger and a lantern, and, if you please, rather more paperwork. So, the duet is a nocturnal map written on walls and papyri, not merely imagined, where Greeks place a coin and trust a ferryman's oath. Egyptians arm their dead with spells, precise names, and metamorphoses that read like an application form to the afterlife. Both systems bind the living and the dead in reciprocal obligation, but the instruments differ. River and rite for the Greek margin, text, technique and transformation for the Egyptian nights. Think of it as two pearl-light civilizations arranging the same funeral. One dips the boatman, the other fills in all the boxes in triplicate and hopes the gods have a decent stapler. Gates and thresholds, where day unthreads into the nights. The duet is not a foggy hinterland of vague terrors. No, it is a corridor with signs on the wall and a very specific list of what you must say to the bouncer. You see, Egyptian cosmology, in its funerary literature, maps night into a sequence of named gates, guarded caverns, and hourly stations. The underworld, aka the nocturnal journey of Re or Ara through the duet, and the Book of Gates, lay the route out like a nocturnal itinerary. The Book of Heavens and the Book of the Earth at variant terrains, and occasionally rather less congenial fauna. And these texts are not ornamental, no, they are operative manuals, the ancient world's combination of scripture and travel advice. To reach dawn, you do not merely cross something. You perform, declare, transform, and recite your way through, bureaucratic theology, whose officials have zero patience for improvisation. The first technical requisite is bodily preservation. Mummification functions as a kind of material continuity plan. The car needs a house, the bar needs to come and go with dignity, and the name, the Ren, must be visible on the stone and papyrus. The tomb becomes an administrative center for the continuing life of the dead. Pyramid texts begin genre in royal contexts, of course. Coffin texts extend these privileges to elites. The Book of the Dead, apparently written by Tuf, aka Jehuti himself, democratizes the repertoire for those who can afford spells. Each stratum translates metaphysical hope into practical instruction. There's words to be spoken, forms of address to be assumed, and transformations to be enacted. If the Greek dead travel light, the Egyptian dead travel with a satchel full of instructions and a very helpful scribe, Jehuti. And names with the gates are crucial currency. Tomb scenes repeatedly traumatize sealed doors stamped with names, anthropoid guardians with skeptical expressions, and serpent wardens who look if they have been on duty since before the Old Kingdom and intend to stay so. The deceased is supplied with formulae that function like passwords in disguise. I'm a swallow, I'm a flame, I'm the soul of fire. Each transformation allowing the traveler to be read as a permissibly formed by the gatekeepers. Failure to recite the correct name is rather inconvenient. It is kinda terminal. A soul that arrives without its paperwork is liable to be turned away. Basically, stucking before a named door that will just not open, and one imagines the gatekeeper, with an evil will, ticking the boxes and looking mildly displeased. So, tombs in turn are built to passage. The false door and offering chapel are not picturesque set dressing. No, not really. They are functional thresholds through which offerings and the car circulate. Royal tomb corridors with their painted hours and hour names act as theatres where the sun's nocturnal voyage is repeatedly enacted. Outside, the living erect stelae and offering tables as ongoing maintenance contracts. Anniversary, libations, and the upkeep of memory are the everyday accounting by which the dead household remains solvent. In short, the Egyptian afterlife is a matter of administrative continuity. Of course it is. Keep the books balanced, feed the car, and the doors will largely behave. And guardians. Guardians populate these gates in numbers sufficient to make one suspect an ancient fondness for security staff. Serpents coil, decoy deities raise forbidding hands, and functionaries check identities with the sort of punctualness we associate with custom offices. The cosmic pest, Apep or Apophis, blaze the realm of the night's great antagonist. A serpent who seeks to swallow the sun, aka Ra, and whose defeat is ritually rehearsed in tombs and temple liturgies. Yet, not every guardian wants to eat you. No, many are administrative rather than hostile. Most of them, in fact. Their interest is simple. Do you possess the right name? Can you perform the right form? One might imagine them with polite but unbending professionalism, refusing entry until the correct incantation is pronounced. These procedural emphasis answers our theological temperament. Egyptian religion privileges technique and continuity. The Greek ritual often insists that memory and oath be observed. Egyptian practice insists that the form be exact. The household doesn't leave a coin and go home. It sustains an administrative relation with its dead. Epicurean perhaps in its comforts, but rigorous in its ritual obligations. Offering spells and the sculpted name on stone are the instruments that hold a person's afterlife economy together. If the Greek system is a matter of social tokens, the Egyptian is a matter of technical competence and a fair amount of paperwork. So, a human will get help, make this plain without the need for melodrama. So, picture an embalmer lowering linen around a carefully wrapped body. A scribe, Antenlit, inscribes our names on a fresh papyrus. A relative lays out bread and beer before quietly intoning the first of the required spells. Outside the tomb, the offering table is set like a communal check, credited in wine and cakes, and the tomb's painted corridor begins, in miniature, the sun's nightly voyage. It is a scene of ritual precision and an intimate labor. The afterlife here is less a sudden metaphysical lottery and more an ongoing household arrangement sustained by exact performance. So, imagine the duet's gatekeepers as the most polite civil servants you could ever meet. All protocol and no whimsy. They do not smash you for lack of proper naming. They merely record a lapse in hieratic script and politely ask you to come back when you have the right incantation. No infernal torment, just the mercy of bureaucracy. Ra's nightly journey, the Borg that unbinds and binds again. If the gates were the door's paperwork, then Ra's nightly voyage is its theater, a ritual blockbuster that makes the cosmos tom. Each night, the great Borg slips beneath the visible world, and what looks like sunset to the eye becomes the first scene of an ordered hour-by-hour odyssey. You see, the underworld and the Book of Gates lay the route out with the meticulousness of a city map. 12 hours, each with named gates, guardians, and topographies. And these are not idle curiosities, they are operational stages in which death, danger, and renewal are enacted, and in which the sun god must perform his nightly liturgy, or the world risks staying dark. Does not so much vanish as change offices. At dawn he is Khepri, the scarab who rolls the newborn sun. By midday he sits full-faced and sovereign. As evening falls, he may be Atum, or different nocturnal aspects. The texts prefer multiplicity to a single planned identity. During the night he is vulnerable, hidden, and subject to assault that daylight never shows. The bark that bears him is crewed by deities and aids, and its compartments are full of named forces and guardians. Allies who speak spells, enemies who lurk in pit and cavern. In the underworld, the owls are scenes, caverns, lakes, serpentine foes, and registers of being who salute the sun or seek to hinder him. The Book of Caverns and the Book of the Earth offer variant stages and enemies, not contradictions so much as alternative productions on the same sacred scripts. The recurrent antagonist Apep or Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, who seeks nightly to devour the bark and unmake the world's order. The combat with Apep is a ritual as much as myth. Temple liturgies and fury spells rehearsed to defeat. Priests make gestures and songs to hold chaos at bay. And tomb scenes show the serpent subdued, so the sun may be reborn. This is not merely spectacle, it is theology in motion. The cosmos continuing depends on that nightly victory. Imagined, rehearsed, and ensured by words and images painted into stone. So, mechanically, the myth enacts a model of death and rebirth that differs from the Greek shore, where Greeks dramatize passage and juridical boundary. Egyptians dramatize transformation and reintegration. The sun's descent models the soul's inward journey, danger and darkness, but also regenerative union. In many royal texts, Ra's voyage culminates in a kind of merging with Vizier, aka Osiris, or in a mutual recognition. Ra as a ruler of day meets Osiris as lord of the dead. And that union is the source of renewal. The deceased, if properly equipped, aims to follow and to be present at the rebirth. The texts provide the hour names, the necessary transformations, and the hymns that will allow a mortal to be counted among those whose rise with the sun. So, the evening hush closes, the sky folds like a curtain, and the great bouquet is drawn into a cavern where only torchlight glints on shields and on the scales of lurking serpents. A hiss, a struggle, a priestly chant like a rope being pulled tight. And then, at the hinge of the hour, the hall creaks, a scarab god heavens, and a pinpoint of light bursts itself into the rim of the horizon. Dawn is not merely return, it is a small triumphant remaking. Khepri heaves the sun upward, as if rolling a world-sized pebble, and the city wakes because the ritual has been done. Imagine a commuter stuck on the night tube, whose driver is Apep, a serpent with dubious timekeeping. and be grateful your morning coffee does not depend on a hymn being chanted correctly. Osiris called and Inhabitants, the king returned, household of the dead. If Ra's voyage supplies the Duard's great plots, then Osiris supplies its courtly center, the royal household to which every properly maintained tomb aspires. Think of Osiris as the Duard's housemaster, returned king, emblem of regenerative kingship, and the figure around whom cult Lord Hope gather. He is not a mere resident of the underworld. He is the very principle that makes renewal legible. When the sun's nightly script performs cosmic repetition, Osiris gives the deceased a motto of ordered resurrection, a king's death that becomes the pattern for a household's continuance. His cult underwrites the ordinary person's hope that, with correct rites, the tomb can be an address in the city of the dead, the necropolis. The Duard is therefore populated like a royal court. Around Osiris gather retinues of deities and attendants, local and ancestral deities who oversee particular functions, and the successful dead themselves, the Ahu, the transfigured, effective spirits who have passed from mere memory into luminous presence. The Ach is not an abstract reward, but a social reality. One transfigured, the deceased, is an actor in the nether household, a named supporter of cult and recipient of offerings. Opposed to them are, of course, hostile beings and chaotic forces. Otherwise, it would be pretty boring. Serpents, yeah, always serpents, but don't get confused, they're also good serpents as well. Demons and disorderly powers who represent what the court forbids. The cosmology thus arranges person into court roles: king, steward, scribes, attendants, and petitioning kinsfolk. Each role has expectations and places where the living may address them. So, to understand how a person might move into that household, we need the Egyptian soul theory and practice. You see, the Egyptian parcels a person into several complementary components. The Ka is the life force tied to offerings and the family estate. It needs sustenance and a dwelling place. The Ba is the more animate personality, the bird-like mobility that can leave the tomb at will and return. The name, the Ren, is the social index. Erase their name and the person fades. When ritual, text and offering work, these parts together may be transfigured into the Ach, the luminous, efficacious form that participates in the royal court and aids the living. Achieving Achut is not a metaphysical lottery, it is a contractual and technical. The living supply food and recite spells, priests perform rites, the tomb's images and inscriptions provide the technical knowledge the deceased requires. The result is less an ascent than a conversion. The household remains, but one's place in it is transformed, from mortal tenant to ritualized honored presence. And those practicalities produce the most striking ritual echoes. Temples and tomb stages, the same domestic economy. Mortuary priests act as the household staff. They present offerings, read the necessary spells, and maintain a cult that keeps the Ka fed and the name bright. Offering lists carved on stelae and walls look, frankly, like household accounts. Bread, beer, incense, linen. Items listed as if one steward's pet. The king's tomb seems replicate the royal court in miniature. Bouquets are roads, servants attend, and the deceased are shown receiving the goods that make continued life possible. Local cemeteries host small chapels and offering tables where family enact ongoing contracts. Here shines a local deity called integrate ancestors into communal piety. In ritual terms, the living are not merely mourners, they are employees of the dead household, responsible for its solvency across generations. So, picture this. A priest in linen recites the offering formula. A young son pours beer into a small vessel and speaks the name aloud. The act is domestic and administrative at once. Nourishment for the car, invocation for the bar, and the public renewal of the deceased's presence among the Ahu. In that tiny economy, the distinction between palace and home collapses. Every tomb aspires to the dignity of the royal household because Osiris cult is the archetype of ordered renewal. One may be tempted to read the system as purely transactional, and in some registers it is precisely that, a ledger of offerings and spells. But the ritual economy is also profoundly social and ethical. The obligation to remember, to maintain lineage cult, and to keep the name intact binds families into moral practices that last generations. The cult of Osiris teaches a civilization how to be a community across time, order the household, honor the dead, and thereby secure a measure of eternity. It is practical theology with the human face. And if the dude has a royal court, then perhaps Osiris is the most patient host imaginable, receiving petitions at all hours, tolerating the odd unpaid offering, and never, so far as we know, sending anyone to the abyss, merely filling their RSVP. He is severe where he must be, but his severity is, in essence, managerial. The cult runs on correct names, correct rites, and correct remembrance. And judgment reward and ritual efficacy, the balance, the field, the promise kept. So, the duet ends. Well, it reaches its hinge. At a tribunal that is as theatrical as it is bureaucratic. But don't worry, that is an actual working bureaucracy. The weighing of the heart against the feather of my heart. If the gates were paperwork and the Ra's voyage a rehearsal, then here is the final audit, kinda, in which the soul's private ledger is opened and the household accounts are either balanced or written off. Passing here means you are allowed to continue your journey. It is not the end of the duet. This is quite literally the heart of the duet. Anyway, the scene is precise in the funerary corpus. Inpu, aka Anubis, leaves the dead before a set of scales. He was also the one who was there from the very beginning of your journey, he alongside an entire entourage. Tooth, Ibis-headed and immaculate, stands to records. My heart's feather is laid upon the balance as the measure of truth and right order, and Amit, lion-bodied and crocodile-headed, lurks nearby as a somber consequence for failure. Don't worry, she only jumps in action if you fail. Spell 125 of the Book of the Dead furnishes ritual language. The deceased speaks a litany of declaration, the so-called negative confessions, 42 to be more precise. Not strictly a checklist of sins, but attestations of one's conformity to my art's order, while the heart is swayed against the feather. If it balances, the deceased is granted place among the blessed and can continue their journey. If it fails, well, annihilation, aka Amit is devouring your heart. The person's name fades, the afterlife ceases, and they are effectively unmade. Mechanically, success in the weighing opens access to the further path to Ao, the fields of reeds, the paradise of Osiris. An agricultural paradise that is at once familiar and idolized. Canals that run clear, endless barley and emmer, oxen that yield without toil, and a house where family coal continues undisturbed. And the Egyptian afterlife is emphatically domestic in its rewards. It is not an landscape of moral torment or the wicked, so much as a promised continuity for those whose accounts balance, a continuation of household life in improved, orderly form. Failure is catastrophic in its simplicity, not existence, rather than the torment and perpetuity found in some other traditions. The moral sting, therefore, is existential erasure. This economy is at once moral and technical. The Egyptians weave ethical comportment into ritual efficacy, to speak true names, ma-heo, to perform the correct rites, to maintain offerings, and to live in a manner consonant with ma'at, are not separable tasks. The 42 negative confessions catalogue social obligations as much as inner virtues. Do not steal, do not slander, do not violate the guests. While the emphasis remains procedural, the oath must be demonstrable, the name must be intact, and the tomb's code must be maintained. The Book of the Dead thus serves as both moral catechism and passport to zero. Proper conduct in life and correct practice in death are two sides of the same coin. Cultic practice institutes the system in perpetuity. Mortuary priest, offering list on stone, anniversary feast, and the continual presentation of food and drink are the instruments that keep the deceased accounts solvent. The offering table is, quite literally, an ATM for the car. Bread, beer, incense, gratitude, renewed and recorded in the household ledgers of stelae and tomb paintings. These acts keep the deceased's name alive and their bar mobile, and they supplement the spells that secure the scales. In short, the afterlife is less a distant promise than an ongoing social practice, a living contract between the living and the dead. So, picture a low-lit corridor. Inbu, aka Anubis, adjusts the scales. Jehudi, aka Tooth, dips his pen, and the human heart, your heart, sits in trembling quiet on one pen, as Ma'at's feather sits immaculable on the other. The deceased, aka you, intones the negative confessions, one by one. The feather trembled like a smooth, impartial judge. A hush, then balance, more not. The result is not merely insurance for an individual soul. It is the community's moral pedagogy enacted in miniature, each time the spell is read and the offering pulled. So, think of the weighing as the cosmic chartered accountant's office. No dramatic thunder. If the books are in order, only the quiet satisfaction of balanced ledgers. Well, fail to file the recipients, and you will not be fined forever. You will simply be struck from the roads.